School District School Board on December 13th at 9 a.m. We will go in. We have decided to just take a quick moment of silence for the devastation that happened in Kentucky over the weekend. If you would all join me. All right, thank you. We will go straight in to our master facilities design planning. Todd, are you going to kick us off?
You know, I think we're going to turn it right over to our two teams today, give them as much time as possible to present their materials and give you opportunity to ask questions along the, or as they make their presentations. So I believe the MHTN Hogan team will be up first to talk about the high school and Ecker Hill.
Perfect. Thank you, guys.
Good morning, everybody. From what I understand, we have about 45 minutes for the first discussion on Park City and Ecker. Is that correct? Thumbs up? Yeah, okay, sounds great. Let me share my screen and we can get rolling. Okay, is everybody seeing that on the screen now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Awesome, thanks so much. Well, great to be here again. Appreciate always the opportunity to talk with the board and have discussions about where we've been and where we're going. As mentioned, we'll focus first on high school and then move to Ecker. We wanted to set the table just to touch on some of the conversations we've been having to date about, I guess, taking the ideas that were developed in the master plan and then pushing those to the next step. As with any conversation, we always like to underpin everything back to those 6 guiding principles. Those are very strong. I think the district can feel confident that any of the decisions made are really reflecting back to these ideas. Particular to the projects the MHTN and Hogan are working on, we really felt it was important to start to showcase some of the ideas associated with these 6 guiding principles. And so you're seeing some conceptual images that were developed over the last couple of weeks here. That really start to reflect some of the ideas that we've heard from your community, from your constituents. We have had the chance to meet with a number of groups, ranging from students at the high school level to parents at Ecker. And so we feel like we're getting a good handle on some of the ideas that we are hearing about both of these projects and some of the salient ideas associated. So you're seeing kind of some imagery on the screen about learner-centered environments. Creating spaces not only for large groups, but for the individual. We actually had a pretty fantastic conversation even as late as Friday, talking with some folks about mental health and some of the spaces that could be created there. The idea of positive, healthy schools and looking at blending ideas of interior and exterior environments, really bringing that outside in. Talking about relationships and finding spaces within both buildings for students to gather to celebrate learning and put that on display. As we know, the CTE is really a primary function for all of these ideas, and it's really underpinned by this idea of real world experience, that these spaces that we are developing currently can really reflect ideas of connecting to community, connecting to those certification programs that are already within the district, and looking at how we can kind of bolster the CTE efforts within the district. We're going to continue to refine as we move forward some of these ideas, working closely with Roger and Amy at both schools to understand the specific needs for these spaces. Lindsay Huntsman has also been involved in our work sessions and has been very helpful in terms of providing information about how we move forward on these concepts. In terms of flexibility and adaptable spaces, we are still leaning on the idea of steel construction so that in the future these buildings could pivot and adapt. We also feel very important that furniture and looking at technology and all of these things together can really support the district's goal of creating flexible spaces. And finding the places to celebrate inclusion for all as we move forward. As we know, LEED Silver is a conversation and is ongoing. We've had some very good kind of preliminary ideas and thoughts about how we can achieve these. I would say that they're still in the cooker right now, and we'll continue to refine those and present those at a later date. It is important to note that we are understanding the goal of 35 for the EUI requirements for both schools. It looks like Wade is actually on the call here today from Van Borum, and maybe talking a little bit more about this for the other projects. We really have a strategy moving forward for both schools to meet these EUI requirements. 35 is aggressive. Just as a kind of a comparison, your existing schools for the high school and Ecker are in the range of about 60 to 85. And so it's going to be a real big sweep in terms of coming back to that 35. But there's some fantastic things that happen long range in terms of sustainability. So let's talk specific about these two unique schools. You're seeing on the screen some site imagery that we've pulled from Ecker. Very unique kind of in terms of the characteristics, especially as you're driving along I-80. Great presence along the foothills there. There's also very strong character to the design elements associated with Park City High School. And we want to celebrate all of these ideas as we move forward. As our team really started to look at, how do we encapsulate all of these ideas, we were really taken by the beautiful scenery that surrounds both of these projects. Additionally, there's a lot of kind of site context that we felt was important to reflect. There's a lot of textures and patterns. Connection to the outdoor obviously is very important, but we feel like there's a lot of design ideas already within the community that we can start to cook on. We also came back to this idea very early on about this concept of a nature pavilion, that both of these structures, both of these buildings could take on more of kind of a feel of a higher ed building, a place that kind of blends the ideas from interior to exterior. Not that these are necessarily what you would see at the end of the day, but this concept of more of a pavilion piece that sets the stage for future development that could happen down the road. Our big picture design idea is this kind of design concept of interwoven, and you're seeing some of the words on the screen, but I think you'll see as we move forward in the design and kind of future presentations that this idea of interwoven is kind of a very strong design concept that we can play off of. Not only does it reflect some of the 6 guiding principles, but it also starts to talk about some of the textures, the quality, the space that we'll be trying to provide for both of these schools. So as we look at specific to the Park City project, Park City High School project, we felt it was important to take the kind of the roadmap between the master plan effort and where we are currently. And I'll probably pause in between the high school and then the discussion on Ecker just to see if there's any questions. So you're seeing on the screen the existing plan. The existing plan really, if we kind of relate to what is anticipated, we are still planning on demolishing the area highlighted in the square there. As we've talked with Hogan and their team, it really feels like a strategy of having 2 phases for this project, like we've always discussed, and that the CPE wing on the north side would be the first phase of demolition. We've talked with Roger and coordinated in terms of where those students temporarily go. I think the positive thing in this phasing strategy is we're only losing 6 or 7 teaching spaces on this first phase. And then as we shift, kind of pivot into phase 2, we actually pick up a lot of square footage. So students kind of flip-flop, juggle around a little bit. We're continuing to refine those conversations about phasing to make sure that, for example, your kitchen can still function during that construction period, and that all the functions of that school really are in place throughout the construction period. So as you remember, the master plan really looked at, as we demolished, we're adding this kind of linear piece along the western edge. We kind of affectionately call this the bat wing, just because the 2 areas splay. What we found though is we kind of dove deeper into some of the site constraints, is that we wanted to maybe rethink the overall shape and kind of perspective of that piece. To highlight a couple of things that we found since our previous conversations, we now understand that there's a pretty extensive sewer line that runs straight through the middle of that site, and that the visitor bleacher, just from a pure cost standpoint, would be ideal if we could avoid. And so we've started to explore alternative plan layouts that really start to squeeze things down a touch. That take our learning communities and initially those were kind of groups of 7, 8 classrooms shared around an open collaboration space, and start to cluster them around kind of groups and pods of 4. From a pros standpoint, this allows us to keep those visitor bleachers. That could be a future project if there were some improvements that needed to be made to Dozer Field. And then we can still provide the access, fire access from Ecker Street, to Lucky John. Additionally, what you're seeing is the rework of the back of house area. That horseshoe area would need to be kind of regraded to provide delivery access to those spaces and provide additional parking stalls. This was a request from the PC CAPS group so that there's parking spaces directly available for their mentors as they enter into the building from that backside. It could also be some supplementary staff parking areas for your food service folks. So looking at what that plan looks like on the inside, kind of working from the very lowest level on the basement, we would have a number of CTE functions. And we're working with Lindsay and her group to understand where those unique spaces are. But we're seeing this, for example, as kind of a construction lab space. The yellow is indicating open collaboration areas, with the blue being more of a focus towards classroom spaces. You're also seeing some darker blue colors indicated here that would be general purpose classrooms. And there's a number of those scattered throughout the building. Really the northern portion for the first 2 levels is the PC CAPS and CTE focus. Those areas directly flank the new expanded cafeteria commons area. And then we're providing in phase 2 the relocation of the learning center, as well as a bolstering of your special ed components. That would account for some additional office space, which you're seeing in orange, as well as some teacher team rooms throughout the building that would handle future growth if there was ever a decision made to kind of shift around how you're allocating your kind of classroom spaces. Again, those learning communities are really centered around 4 classroom pods. This allows us to provide fantastic views to the west and really build on that idea of the pavilion, that there's strong connection between the indoors and outdoor spaces. One last thing to point out on this diagram is there is, like we mentioned, the expansion of the common space. And this should allow for an additional 300 seats in that common area, as well as a new kind of learning stair component that would sit directly to the end of end of that space. As we shift up to the 3rd floor, or I guess the 2nd floor, what you have is a lot of general purpose classrooms. And we worked with Roger on this to understand the number that are needed for that space. But that really accounts for all of the students from Treasure Mountain coming into the building. At this point, we're about a net gain of 20 to 30 classrooms. And so we really have all the CTE spaces, the PC CAP spaces, the general classroom spaces, in addition to what we've lost with the demolition of the existing building. So, you're also seeing the introduction of a new media center space. As you remember, the current media center has been allocated to the PC CAPS program, and there was strong consensus from the community, from Roger, from his teams, that there needed to be a space for community gathering as well as kind of the celebration of the media arts. Before we shift to Ecker, can I answer any questions about the PC High School project?
Yeah, one question. This is Andrew. We've gotten some questions about the use of parking during construction at the high school. And I know you've probably been asked this before, but since we're on this call, what is your anticipation of the number of spots that we'll lose during the construction project? So not, overall, but we have a lot of, we have like the Park City Mountain and other people who use our lots during the year. And they're redoing their lots. And so they're going to be relying on us to provide our lots. And so we want to make sure that if we are losing a ton of spots during construction, that we can communicate that to them.
Great question. It's something that we're currently evaluating right now. And John, I don't know if you have any other additional feedback. We for sure during that first phase lose a lot of the back of house areas, which is not necessarily where you guys are parking currently. As we shift, excuse me, as we shift to phase 2, there will be an impact zone. Really, it's kind of undefined at the moment just because we don't know how wide of a scope we have for that front parking lot rework. There's a lot of, I guess the technical term is squirreliness, we'll say, as you get in and out, as you park, as parents drop off, as buses are interacting in that zone. And we're going to try to clean up as much as we can for the budget that we have. And so it could be that that zone that's clouded right now really gets impacted, which could be 100 or so stalls. But Andrew can follow up with some information about that as well as a more detailed phasing description and timeline.
Yeah, that'd be great. The Park City Planning Commission has asked us directly for feedback on that. So as soon as we can get an estimate, even if we, I think, err on the side of conservative estimate in terms of the max dislocation, that would be great.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Thanks.
Any other questions about the high school? So similar conversation to Ecker. Again, you're seeing the existing building plans on the screen. As you remember, the right-hand side of that existing building is the newest portion of that existing structure. And so really our focus with the master plan effort was how can we maximize the area on the oldest portion and kind of shuffle the cards just a touch. Really the overall plan stays consistent, that with the addition of the new gymnasium, that will allow us to reconfigure the existing gym into the cafeteria space, which then opens up the heart of that building for a new CTE kind of maker space, showcasing science and learning on display. And then we pick up an additional swath of classrooms around the perimeter of the building. From the master plan to where we are now, this stays very consistent. One of the ideas that was developed as we looked at this with a construction partner was minimizing the impact to student activities during construction. And so initially we had planned to demolish a portion of that building and then add that back. There was a thought that, okay, well, what happens if that remains in place and we push all of the first phase of construction outside of the existing building line? So you're seeing in blue the existing building. The red is the new additions that would kind of tack on to the end of those existing learning communities. And then during the construction process, we would make the necessary connections and penetrations back through that area. So again, the red is indicating the new zones of construction. Really, the remodel work is focused on the center of that building, primarily on the heart of the building, as well as the cafeteria space. One other thing of note, as this is on the screen right now, we're currently evaluating where the buses go. As you know, with the increase in students at the school, we're going to pick up some additional buses. We're kind of anticipating that we'll have 20 to 22 buses on site. And currently your buses enter on that north area. There's kind of a secured drop-off zone on that front. We're exploring two options. One is that potentially shifting all of the buses to the front of the building to provide better access. This would allow us to pull all of the parent drop-off onto the north side, which would alleviate the concern that happens currently where traffic backs up into Kilby. We're also exploring an option with the district to purchase an additional portion of property on that northern side. I know that's still under discussion, but could supplement some of the parking that needs to happen as we look at kind of the overall site plan, in addition, adding additional faculty members to the site. I would say that both of these ideas are still under consideration at this point. Nothing is finalized. We are still evaluating as well whether buses end up on the northern side and parking remains as is on the south side. So looking on the inside of the building, again, this has stayed very consistent with the master plan efforts. You're seeing the remodeled cafeteria space now that we have the new gymnasium area. That student commons area really becomes the heart of the building, which flanks and allows us to add these new learning community wings. In this case, we have 6 classrooms per wing, and those stack 2 stories. And then we're looking at adding additional CTE space around the existing perimeter of that core of the building to really showcase science and learning on display. The other topic of consideration that we're looking at with Amy and her staff is kind of a shuffling of the location of the science classrooms. If you remember, this is currently where some of the CTE functions are happening within the building. Now that all of those center into the existing part of the building, this opens up some real estate that we can really create a science wing for the classrooms. And that would have some shared support space as well as kind of a good relationship with kind of the CTE areas that are happening on that area. Any questions about the overall plan and strategy for Ecker Hill? Okay. So in terms of overall update, you're seeing kind of a very crude schedule, we'll say, that talks about where we're going and where we've been. There was, I think, fantastic support with the pre-design and bond support services, culminating in a successful passage of the recent bond. We are right in the midst of schematic design with our team, and anticipate that the schematic plan, both from the interior and site perspective, would be locked in by the end of the year. This really keeps us on track to refine that design idea as we kick off 2022, so that Hogan and their teams can get on site as soon as things start to thaw out. We anticipate that there'll be an early bid package that would be issued kind of the March-ish timeline, and that the full construction documents would be issued in June. This really gets us rolling and doesn't push us past where we've always talked about with the overall phased construction approach, kind of that interim mid-stage occupancy that occurs over the summer of 2023 with final occupancy in 2024. With that kind of concludes the presentation that we have from our side. We'd be happy to answer any questions or clarify any items for you.
Thank you, Scott. That's a great overview, and I really appreciate your catching all of us up as to how things have been going. And thank you so much for the time that you've dedicated to hearing from stakeholders. I think it's been really productive and helpful.
You're welcome. Appreciate the opportunity.
Yes, thank you so much. Do any of the board members have any questions before we move on?
No, I do not.
Neither do I.
Aaron, I have Kara in the conference room with me. She does have a question.
Hi, I was just wondering what elements or what structures are the green structures, what we're doing about that exactly, what parts of it is it, and what does it entail?
I'm sorry, I missed the first part of that question. What parts of the green structures? Is that what was asked?
Well, I mean, so we have some sustainable green building, and I don't know exactly what those parts are.
Mm-hmm.
Can you address that, please?
Sure, you bet. So we're very early in terms of the concept development on those ideas. Really, at this point, we've been focusing on the EUI, the energy use intensity for both of these buildings. With both of these existing buildings, where we're in the 60s to 80s, there's a lot of legwork that needs to happen to meet some of the energy goals for the project. And there's been some development. Van Borum, who's on the line here, has assisted with the discussion about what mechanical system goes into both of these projects to really meet those targets. At the Park City project, we're really leaning on a very kind of innovative system that has some built-in redundancy that would allow us to hit that target. One of the advantages of Ecker is we do have additional real estate and are able to add kind of a geothermal well field on the northern edge, which allows us to get an even better EUI for the new construction areas. Moving forward, We've had very preliminary discussions internally on our design team side about accomplishing the LEED silver components. You're seeing on the screen the general categories that fall under LEED. And we're looking specifically at how the building can reflect some of these ideas. One of the early conversations we had with the district as well as our design team is this idea of showcasing these ideas within the building, so that things like EUI make sense to people as they walk into a structure, that they understand that, whether that be a dashboard, whether that be signage, whether that be kind of branding elements within the building. As you walk into both of these schools, and again, that idea of a nature pavilion, it feels like a sustainable building. And so we're very early in terms of conceptualization on these ideas, and would be happy to kind of come back with more concrete ideas. But it for sure is a conversation moving forward with our team. Well, thanks for the time. I'll stay on the line if there's any other questions that pop up in the course of the conversation. Thank you.
Wonderful. So now we are happy to introduce our elementary VCBO Hughes team. And I'm going to go ahead and let you guys once again introduce yourselves to the board and then go ahead and share your presentation.
Sounds good. Just go to the next slide. So I'm Brianna Bonsavage with BCBO. I've got several of our team members here in the room. So Hughes, Mike, and Greg. We've got George here on our team and Whitney, and a few stragglers missing that are probably on the call. And we're happy to be here this morning to update you. So starting off we just have a couple slides with the master plan on there. We've been diving into the master plan, of course, and the ed spec, and evaluating your sites, meeting with stakeholders. We'll get into that a little bit more in a minute. But we're in the middle of program verification right now on all 4 schools, and schematic design on Parley's, Jeremy Ranch, and McPullen. We're starting a little bit on Trailside, but that one will take a little bit of a back seat to the other 3 because they have construction starting sooner. Plans. So with program verification and outreach, we've met with several stakeholders. You were with us for most of those. We've recently started reaching out to your early childhood educators, community ed, special ed, the principals at Jeremy Ranch and McPullen, and we'll schedule shortly with the principal at Parley's Park as well. So we've started getting a lot of feedback from these folks and starting to massage the plans now a little bit to meet some of their needs and to get that program verification completed. One of the things we've begun doing with these groups is to start touring similar facilities. So we recently went out to Mountain View Community Learning Center and toured their facility. They've got a campus right there, but they have the wraparound services. They call it community learning, and I think health and wellness. So we got to tour through there and see how they're tackling some of these programs and get some great ideas from them, which we've been able to sort of talk about and take back and implement into our plans as well. We're in the near future going to go out and visit a preschool, I think it is, in Brigham City, which we need to get scheduled here pretty soon.
So through this process, we've been working through just really getting an understanding of what spaces are needed, how big we want those spaces to be, and how the plan can best meet the needs of the district. And so we're not going to spend a lot of time going through these tables, but we have gone through and identified all of the various spaces that are required, again, how big they are, and some of the modifications that we found to the master plan. So for example, one of the things that we found in the wraparound services is a larger community-oriented kitchen and cooking area is something that's really important for that sort of community engagement and need. And so we've reduced some of the open office space and flipped that into more of a kitchen and a community space. And the wraparound services specifically are still being refined as we move forward. We have a lot of great spaces identified, and exactly how many of them are dedicated to various uses is something that will be refined in the near future. The shared spaces for the community, the multi-purpose room, community education room, living room, pantry, those have stayed very consistent through all of our conversations. And then we've also been, as Brianna mentioned, refining the early education spaces, the learning studios, the quantity and the support components associated with those, and diving in a little bit deeper to some of the specific needs, for example, for some of the STEAM studios, art, science, music spaces that we'll be providing there as well, and a deeper dive into understanding some of the SPED and OT-PT needs for the various schools. And then we're also, again, just tracking our square footage and how that is comparing to what was budgeted. In some schools, we're a little bit over, and others we're a little bit under, so we're still refining those numbers and working towards those targets.
So here's an example of, so this one's Jeremy Ranch McPolin. The floor plans are the same, as you know, or very similar. So on this one, so we're looking at McPolin, it looks like right here. So one of the things that came up was at McPolin, they wanted to have the preschool oriented more towards the front of the school. So one big change is we've taken that floor plan and mirrored it from what was in the master plan. So you can see that here off to the right what that looks like. That'll be the same at both McPolin and Jeremy Ranch. Let's go to the next one, got some blow ups. So here's a blow up of sort of the wraparound services area on the top, and on the right here, there's the community ed space, same as what was in the master plan, the living room. Off to the right is the kitchen and work area that Whitney was just talking about. We're planning on having that sort of kitchen space be, it could be for classes, it could be community space. So we're showing an operable partition between in the living room to sort of open that up when the need arrives. And then we've got the reception and secure vestibule there into the preschool and into the wraparound services. We've tried to keep that as separate from the preschool as possible. Next to the left are the STEAM studios. So they've identified sort of the need for a more acoustic space, which you see on top for music. There's some storage still. On the bottom, we have more of the science art STEAM studio. So it'll have hardier finishes, more storage, some storage sink in the classroom, as well as storage off to the side there. The OT-PT room is right there as well, so close to that connection to the existing school. There's some storage and items within that space that we've gone through your special ed group to identify. And then go into the, Whitney, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I was just going to say the one thing that you'll notice in the areas in sort of red there, we're showing a number of different potential configurations to illustrate how different services could fit in that wraparound cluster. Again, these ones will be refined as we move forward.
And then in the center of the addition here, you've got on the left your learning studios for more of your 3-year-old age group. So they have they each have a breakout quiet space. There's cubbies off the corridor. That little space could also be a little bit of a small collaboration space for them as well, shared between the 2 studios. There's a corridor that go to 2 toilets. Before the toilets were dedicated to each room, we thought it might be nice to have them combined together. So if you have some backup or whatever, and then the storage room between them would be shared. Off to the right is the multi-purpose space. We've combined some of the storage that was there before to accommodate table storage. The users have identified wanting to be able to have the students in the pre-K eat in this space, as well as use it as gym, aftercare, etc. So we wanted to have a lot of storage for those tables. There's also a little workroom there for faculty, and we've been sort of refining what goes in there. There's a special ed office just above that and a dedicated restroom with a shower in it. And then at the bottom here, we've got the pre-K for the older group. So we're saying 4 to 5-year-olds. some changes to that. We've taken that corridor between there and stretched it out and made it more of a collaboration space. Some of, again, just like up in the 3-year-old section, some of the storage rooms and toilet rooms that have been separate are now combined sort of in a core, so they can be shared. We have a little bit of millwork in those spaces. You can see in the bottom left, we've sort of defining what that might look like. And there's also a shared larger breakout group with some windows in it, so you can help watch the kids when they're in there, as well as access from the corridor. Special Ed has identified wanting to be able to take students into those spaces, so they didn't want to have to go necessarily into the classrooms to grab kids and bring them in there. So we've laid out some flexible furniture in there just to kind of show you what could fit in there, what that could look like. We're planning on most of the storage and things in the classrooms being flexible. Let's see, did I talk about the breakout spaces? So these also have the small, quiet breakout rooms if someone just needs a little bit of a break. Again, the cubbies are off of the corridor. That was something else that some feedback we got, that they didn't want that in the classrooms. And that's it for that. Anything I missed, you guys? Okay. So here we've got site plan. So your existing site plan for Jeremy Ranch on the left. On the right is we're still working on this, but this is where we're at right now with the site plan. So you see that flipped floor plan on the right there. The parking lot on the left is existing and it will stay as is. It sounds like off the main road there, we've got some parking for your wraparound services that concur off street. And then the bus loop will be in that right. We kind of point to that, George, off to the right there, as well as pre-K drop off. We're still working through some details of the dock right now because we know that does recess down, but we're kind of working through that. We've met again with the principal and we'll work through some of the playground components. Right now, we've sort of taken, one for one what's there, minus combining. You have two sort of big toy areas right now. We combined it into one. So that was something that came up that we're gonna dig into some more and maybe add another one in there. And then for McPullen, again, existing on the left. On the right is the proposed. From the master plan, we know Treasure Mountain, sorry, I'm kicking in. Treasure Mountain will be staying for a minute. So we're keeping the parking for Treasure Mountain and just expanding it essentially. And so we'll have the existing parking on the south left there will remain as is. It's working fairly well right now for parent drop off. And then buses, we're anticipating going through that Treasure Mountain parking lot, looping up and around, and then being essentially where they are now and dropping off there. So we'll just sort of expand parking and drop off for both Treasure and the addition.
Any questions on McPullen and Treasure before we move into the next one?
I'm so glad to see you guys are thinking all about that, parking and drop off. And I like your solution. This is looking really well thought out. Thank you.
Yes, of course.
Yes, that did come up in a number of our meetings. Everybody wants to make sure that the kids are getting in and out of the school safely. So it is a high priority.
This is Andrew. Who's on the who's providing input on the wraparound services? Do we have any contact with anyone from Intermountain or People's Health Clinic or anyone of that nature, or who's the point person on that?
So we have started working with Early Childhood Alliance. So that's been the group that's provided some research, and that Kristen Schultz kind of leads that group. And they meet monthly, and they do have reps from Community Foundation and People's Health and all that. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks.
Any other questions before we move on? I'm gonna go back to the schedule. Technical difficulties. So really quick on schedule. Right now we're still on task to start construction this late spring. Still planning on having the school for Jeremy Ranch and McPullen open prior to the 2023-24 school year. Right now, again, we're in the middle of programming. We're wrapping that up, and we're in the middle of schematic design for those two currently. And then Parley's Park.
Yeah, and then programmatically for Parley's Park, it is a little bit different. So one of the key programs that we wanted to understand is, of course, the multi-purpose room and the cafeteria program. And so we've been looking at, again, the master plan concept diagram, making some small refinements, very minor in this case, and then also making sure that we understood the need for the learning studios for the early education group, again, for learning studios for Parley's Park, and the associated support spaces and collaboration, as you just saw with the other two. We want to make sure that there's parity between all four of the elementary schools in the early education professional learning community. And so you'll see consistency through all of them at this point.
So here's a diagram of that, what that'll look like. It's very similar to what's in the master plan. Sort of that existing kindergarten space will get demolished in phase 2. In phase 1, we're planning on, we'll end up needing to demolish the kitchen area. A change to the master plan is we've taken, we've kind of mirrored that upper portion as well. So all of your receiving area, the kitchen, mechanical space is all to the north. So it's all accessible off of that loop there, and then move the platform down to where the kitchen had been. So this is part of phase 1. Again, we will need to take over that kitchen for that year while this is built, and then this will open, and then we'll begin the pre-K demolition and addition down in blue. So to Whitney's point, the 4 learning classrooms down here in the blue on the right are very similar to what you saw in Jeremy Ranch and McPolin. Well, similar, they're basically the exact same floor plan, and then just sort of plunked into that existing school off the main corridor, off the entry there. On the left, you've got a blow up of the multi-purpose room platform. You can kind of see how that fits into the end of your existing corridor there. We know there's some spaces we'll need to keep. There's some access to a penthouse that right now I think we're not showing in the plans, but we're aware that it's there and we need to keep it. So we're refining that right now. You can see that mechanical room and kitchen spaces up to the top bit. One thing here, we do have some grade change. So right now we're proposing in that corridor off the multi-purpose room, thanks George, of just putting in a ramp right there. So you'll go down the corridor and then just start to ramp down into that multi-purpose. So your platform would be flush with the main floor. And here's what that will look like currently on your site. So again, existing on the left, on the right, you can see that existing sort of bus loop there. We'll still have the plaza and entrance as planned between the gym and the new classroom wing. And then you've got that access to the new relocated parking lot and your receiving area up to the north there. And then we've kind of reworked a little bit of the playground area as well. So this kind of dives into that schedule. Phase 1 for the gym area will begin this spring. Right now we have Jeremy Ranch and then McPolin and then Parley's going out to bid in the spring, about 2 weeks apart from each other. So this first phase will go out in the spring, will be completed before the 2023-24 school year. And then we'll start demo and construction of the next phase in the next school year. And then Trailside, we'll touch on this briefly. We've been working through programming and schematic on Trailside, but we'll be focusing primarily on those first 3 elementaries and then sort of revisiting Trailside in the next year.
Yeah, and again, you'll see as we move into the floor plans, the learning studios for the early education are very consistent. We'll work through the learning studio needs for the 2 additional spaces to make sure that we're hitting those targets in the future.
So again, this is existing on the left, master plan as well. And then on the right is sort of our initial takeaway. So we have the 4, 4-year-old older learning preschool kids, and then the other 2 learning studios. In this, instead of having the 2 kind of off to the side, we've combined them so they can all have the opportunity to collaborate between one another. And we've added a little space for mechanical in all of the schools. We need to allocate some space for the mechanical systems. In Trailside, we may be able to, attach on to what's existing. We know we'll need some new. With the other schools, we're going to need a new mechanical space for each of them. And that's something we're going to talk about here in a minute, so I won't go into it, but let's go to the next slide. Or are there any questions on Trailside or Parley's Park?
No, thanks for the outline. It's great.
Okay, let's go on to the next. So site plan's still roughly the same. We'll get into that more as time goes on, but here's where we're at currently. And schedule, again, we'll be focusing more on Trailside for the following year so we can be open for the 2024-25 school year. Tongue twister. So we wanted to talk to you guys about mechanical systems and approach and get some feedback from you. We're trying to hit that EUI 35. There's some pluses and minuses with various systems. Our mechanical engineer, I think Wade's on the call, has been evaluating what we can provide you to hit that EUI 35, but there's some pros and cons that we want to go through with you. Wade, do you want to talk more about that? We're going to focus mostly on Jeremy Ranch and McPolin right now, but we're having the same conversations on all 4 schools right now.
Yeah, thank you, Brianna. And then also, I'd just like to say we have similar issues, and I think Scott's brought that up before with Ecker Hill and Park City High School as well. And what's happening to us is with the EUI mandate of 35, that's a really aggressive EUI for the Park City climate. And what really is our biggest contributor to that 35 EUI is gas heat. And gas heat is the common way that we all heat around here, both down in the Salt Lake Valley along the Wasatch Front and up in Park City. And so it takes a paradigm shift to get into this focusing towards getting the EUI lower, which I'm sure your EUI requirement is all in an effort to get towards the down the road to a net zero type goal. And so most of the renewable energy that's available is provided by electricity, whether it be photovoltaic panels or maybe windmills or that kind of thing. And so in order to get our heat so that renewable energy can offset the carbon impact of the heat, we want to get the majority of it to electric if we can. Now, what comes with electric heat is electricity in our region is a lot more expensive than gas. And so what comes with electric heat, if you're not offsetting it with renewable, is a cost impact on your energy bills. And so one of the things that we want to do for sure with electric heat is get it to be as efficient as possible if we're going to use electric heat. And there's a coefficient of performance, a COP, that we look at when we're looking at our heating sources. And that COP can vary from a 0.8, and this is the higher the better, a 0.8 to a 4. So if we're just standard efficiency gas heat, our coefficient of performance is going to be down around 0.8. If we could use ground source heat and water to air heat pumps, we can get an efficiency, we can get that coefficient of performance up to around 4. And what we've talked about is currently with our energy rates, electricity for a cost per for BTU is about 3 times what gas is. And so if we can get to those coefficient of performances that are up at 4, now we can actually beat gas on our energy bills. But if the lower we get on the electric side, then the more that's going to cost us on our electric bill. So unfortunately, a lot of the sites up here in Park City don't lend themselves to be able to apply ground source heat. There's a couple that do, and we're looking at taking advantage of that opportunity and getting the higher coefficients of performance. But a lot of the sites don't lend themselves to that. And so what we're looking at is going with a new technology. What gets us to the higher coefficients of performances, I should mention, is heat pump technology and using the refrigeration cycle to transfer heat from a lower grade heat to a more usable higher grade heat for a building. And these sites that don't allow themselves for ground source, pretty much our option there is air source heat pumps, which the best we can do with air source is a coefficient performance around 2. Just for comparison, if we were just a standard electric resistance heat, that gives us a 1-to-1, so coefficient performance of 1. So anything we can do helps that coefficient of performance. So that was a long-winded way of saying, if we use gas heat in Park City, we're not going to be able to achieve an EUI of 35. And so we've looked at a mechanical system. It's highlighted there, option 1, of applying a lot of energy saving measures to get our energy use as low as possible, but trying to use air source heat pump as good as we can in that cold climate in Park City to get as much of our heat over to the electric side as possible. And so what our 3 options are there is our baseline option is what the baseline would be what we'd be required to build to meet the current energy code. And then option 1 is a high efficiency system. It's more or less the system that was applied in Davis School District for their net zero energy buildings, taking all those energy conservation measures, with the exception of Davis School District on most of their buildings is able to apply ground source heat and get a better coefficient of performance. Where we're not able to, we'll trade that for the air source heat pump. And then option 2 there is more of a conventional mechanical system like what you already have, but applying some current technology to get some more efficiency out of the equipment. But as Scott had mentioned earlier, and on this spreadsheet highlights over to the right existing EUIs. And we have the gas heat EUIs, and then the electricity EUIs, and down at the bottom, a total EUI in kBTU per square foot. And, some getting to 35, as you can imagine, as Scott had mentioned earlier, and as you see here, where the EUIs in the Park City area are in the 80 to 100 area, quite the challenge to get down to 35. And that's where we feel like in order to do that, we need to take advantage of every energy conservation measure we possibly can, including the air source heat pump electric heat option. And so the topic of discussion that we really had the other day is, even though we're using a more efficient heating source from an energy use standpoint, if we're not using gas heat, our energy cost is going to be higher than it would be with gas.
So that was, thank you, Wade, for that. This is a big description to sort of talk about what we're going through on each of these projects to hit that 35 EUI target and the direction that we think we need to head to get there. Do you guys have any questions on that?
So in recapping, it's going to cost more to be more efficient. Is that what I'm getting?
Yes.
Is that the net of that? Okay, so our decision would be, do we want to invest more to be more green, or do we want to invest less to stay where we are with gas? Is that correct?
Yeah, and I think that there's a couple of nuances to this. One is these are based off of current and projected electricity and gas prices, right? So natural gas, we never know what's going to happen with the cost of operations. The general trend, as Wade mentioned, for green buildings is to go all electric as much as possible. And the reason being is as our grid gets greener, your buildings inherently get greener, right? So as we get more renewable energy into the grid has a lower carbon footprint. Therefore, all of our buildings that are using electricity have a lower carbon footprint. So in the short term, yes, it will cost more to operate on a square foot basis a building that is all electric than one that is a hybrid electric and gas. But in the long term, that may shift a little bit.
And what, can I just ask what your thoughts, ideas, recommendations would be on this question?
That's a good question.
I can give you all sorts of opinions, and that's all they are opinions. I will say, I will just reiterate, the trend is from a carbon footprint perspective, all electric is going to get you there in a way that you don't constantly have to make up for your carbon footprint of your natural gas. Now, we are recommending, and Wade is right, some natural gas for efficiency, for peak offset, for a number of reasons here. You will see in option one that we still do have a condensing boiler that does bring a natural gas option into your schools to help balance those costs a little bit. So I think that the work that Wade and his team have done in coming up with sort of this hybrid option one that gets us to that 35 EUI and balances the cost as best as possible does make sense for the district. But again, just opinions.
Okay, thank you for that.
So the exciting part of option one is it does get us to the target. Option two definitely improves where we currently are.
Yes, absolutely. You can see you're spending half as much per square foot per year with option two.
May I ask a question? This is Todd.
Yes.
So in looking at the existing building, those numbers for the EUI reflect the current structure that's in place. And yes, what we've been focusing on is the new construction meeting the EUI of 35. How does that, when we look at the options 1, 2, and baseline, how does that play out? Are those the numbers we would hit just in the new square footage? Or is this what it would take to make the whole building reach the EUI of 35?
No, it's just the new square footage. It would be a substantial investment to bring the whole building up. And one of the challenges is in our new construction, we can build a new construction building envelope with all of the insulation and air barriers and all of those elements that really help contribute to that reduced energy consumption. It would be costly to do that in the existing school, and it's not in this current budget.
So basically, to get the entire building up, it would be a staggered project for the future, and there'd be additional costs associated to get the entire building to balance that with the new addition would be, correct?
Exactly.
Yes, we knew that
Okay.
as we were planning the budget and the priorities. So this is in line with what we had thought. We knew the whole building would not hit that target. We knew it was in the addition areas only.
Okay, then can I ask, thanks for all these follow-ups, and I'm sorry if this sounds like silly, but so if we did, let's say it's option one, the new additions, we hit that target, but as a whole, is there a way to evaluate what that would look like, what our impact would look like when you add the existing to the new?
Yes, we could look at that and just see what the sum of the whole building's impact would be.
Okay, that'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Well, this is terrific. It's provided both the high level overview that we were looking for, but also enough detail that we can see, what the thinking is, what some of the inputs have been in those adjustments to some of the planning. But I love how the early learning teams are really giving you such great insight, how our Early Childhood Alliance has provided some great research for us. And I think that it's going to be such a nice community effort. And you can see the excitement. I know BCBO and Hughes, every time you meet with the team, how excited they are about these improvements for these programs.
Well, thank you guys so much for your time. And yeah, any other questions you have, just let us know.
Thank you guys so much for your
Thank
time.
you.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Wonderful. Look at us running on time, even a little early. It's awesome. Great. MHTN, anything else you wanted to share before we close out for the day?
I don't think so. I think the conversation that Whitney led off in terms of the EUI is relates back to the high school and Ecker project. And that discussion about providing a blended EUI number at the end of the day, we'll put that on our to-do list as well.
Great. BCBO, Hughes, anything else that we did not mention that we feel like we should, but we have the board with us?
I think we're set.
Excellent. And then David, did you want to provide just a quick overview of what we'll do tomorrow for the board meeting for the public?
Sure, thank you. What we'll do is we'll touch on each of the schools briefly. We will not go into the same level of detail that the teams went into today, but we'll basically give you an overview as to the plan, the original plan, and where we are on that plan today and how that's being implemented. And we'll touch on your priorities and how they're being implemented. So
Awesome. Board leadership, anything else that we want to talk about?
No, thank you guys so much for your time this morning.
Todd, Mike, you got your questions answered, or you're good with the update right to date? Wonderful. Excellent. All right, Erin, back over to you. I think we're great.
Perfect. Can I just get a motion to adjourn till our regular session meeting on December 14th at 4 p.m.?
I make a motion to adjourn until our next meeting is stated.
Second.
Perfect. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Perfect. See you guys all tomorrow.
Aye. Thank you so much.
Bye. Thanks,
Thanks.
everyone.
bye.